The history of video games can be traced back to the first computer program game. From this early developmental period emerged the arcade, home consoles, personal computer games, and handheld games. Space War is one of the earliest known digital computer games that allowed for this type of entertainment to be taken to the arcade. Galaxy was the first known coin-operated arcade and made its debut at Stanford University in 1971 as the only one made. 2 months later, Computer Space became the first mass-produced arcade, costing about $20,000 for the hardware and only 10 cents per game or 25 cents for 3. Computer Space was created by Nolan Bushnell and Ted Dabney, who would both later found Atari. In 1972, Magnavox released the first home video game console, the Magnavox Odyssey, invented by Ralph Baer, who is considered the father of home video games, but it was Atari that popularized the home video game industry in its first generation of video games. In 1977, the Atari 2600 became the first successful video game console to use plug-in cartridges instead of having one or more games built in. Originally known as the Atari VCS for Video Computer System, its initial price was $199 with a library of 9 titles. Atari dominated the market during the second generation of video games and completely revived the 1977 crash with its release of the arcade hit Space Invaders in 1980, which was converted to a home video game. In 1983, the market suffered a much more severe crash. Mattel had designed plans to take down the invincible Atari 2600 with its release of the Intellivision, which was armed with 12 games, better graphics and sound, and with the potential to be turned into a home computer with the release of a compatible keyboard. However, it was the crash of 1983 that forced North American companies to abandon the game industry by 1984. Intellivision was the only that continued until 1991. In 1983, Nintendo released the family computer, known in Japan as the Famicom. In the US, it was known as the Nintendo Entertainment System, or the NES, released in 1985. Nintendo dominated the market with its classic hit, Super Mario Bros., and its success revived the video game industry. Other consoles were released to compete against the NES during this third generation of video games. Fourth generation consoles were moved from cartridges and introduced the CD to provide increased storage, like the Sega Genesis. The Atari Jaguar was one of the first fifth generation consoles, which was a more powerful system than the Super Nintendo, but there was a lack of games that used its extra power. Super Nintendo released games like Donkey Kong that became very popular, despite being supposedly inferior. The most popular fifth generation consoles were the Sega Saturn, Sony PlayStation, and the Nintendo 64. PlayStation was originally Nintendo's idea to introduce a CD add-on to its console. After failing to come to an agreement with Sony, they attempted to negotiate with Philips. Sony took advantage of all the research they had done for Nintendo and developed their own console. This led to Nintendo filing a lawsuit claiming breach of contract and attempted in US federal court to obtain an injunction against the release of PlayStation. On the grounds that Nintendo owned the name, the federal judge presiding over the case denied the claim. Sixth generation consoles moved toward PC-like design in gaming consoles, as well as using DVD for game media, creating games that were longer and more visually appealing. This generation also experimented with online gaming. Some examples of sixth generation consoles were the Sega Dreamcast, Sony PlayStation 2, Nintendo's GameCube, and Microsoft's first console, the Xbox, which eventually gained popularity due in part to the success of Halo. As video games have gradually increased in sophistication and complexity, 7th generation systems now utilize some of the most highly technological research and computer engineering. Consoles like the PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, and the Wii support the integration of technology with 21st century students. Video games in school have never been thought as a good mix. While teachers struggle to get kids to study or off the couch, video games have been blamed for inactivity and obesity, as well as a lack of time and concentration dedicated to homework and school. However, there are others that have taken advantage of these highly sophisticated technologies and their engaging potential to use it as a powerful tool in education. In physical education, the integration of technology has only begun to revolutionize the way students engage in physical activity. For example, some districts favor the general shift of gym classes using less competitive activities like Dance Dance Revolution and other extra games that are fun, engaging, and meet the minimum requirements of participation in physical activity. Studies and researchers also support the use of video games in education. The University of Oklahoma Health Sciences Center found that playing video games like the Wii can be as effective for children as moderate exercise. Video games are still finding their way in the field of education, but as technology increases and becomes more economical and as more educational software is developed, game systems will provide another powerful educational technology needed to reach out to this generation of learners.